Welcome to episode 24 of the Basic Thoughtnomics podcast. I'm your host, Chris Grosso, and for this episode, we're going to talk some New York Knickerbockers. Looking forward to having this guest on. He covers them for the New York Post. He is Marc Berman. And Marc, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course, no doubt. All right, let's get right into it with the Knicks here. Just how would you characterize this season so far, given your expectations for the team? They're going to surpass their win-loss total in Vegas by so much. I think it was like 21 to start the year. But just how would you summarize the season in a few words?
Yeah, well, Las Vegas had a 22.5. So if you bet the over, if the Knicks could take out, they beat Washington in this home and home. They play Washington twice at home. Then you win your bet already. So it is a great season to cover, considering I thought I'd be spending March Madness writing about some of these lottery picks like Jalen Suggs and Cade Cunningham. But instead we're, writing about meaningful basketball games for the first time since the 2013-14 season, when Mike Woodson took them to the final few days. It was considered this gigantic disappointment at the time. They were coming off the 54-win season, and the Knicks, really struggled early, but came on and missed out on the playoffs in the final few days. And that was the last time they actually played anything meaningful.
Right. Did you think in your wildest dreams they'd be? I mean, obviously they're going to surpass their win-loss total, but did you ever think they'd be like this good, potentially a top 4 team in the East? I think they're a game out of the top 4 spot. Granted, there are a lot of teams jumbled in there, but do you ever think they'd be this good?
Yeah, I think no, I didn't, and I think I underestimated the coaching factor. We talk about this as a players' league, but sometimes a guy like Tom Thibodeau comes along and shows that it's also a coaches' league, and he took most of the same players from last season and made them competitive. Now, this is a pandemic season, and there's a lot of oddities to the year and a condensed schedule and shortened schedule and teams missing players for not just catching COVID, but being around someone with COVID. So it is a little bit of an oddball season, but maybe Tom was the perfect guy for a season like this because he's all about basketball, and the players don't have a social life anymore on the road. They have to stay in a hotel. At home, there's nowhere to go out to the nightclubs. So they've all focused on basketball, and there's no better teacher than Tom Thibodeau.
Do you think the Knicks, they have their guy locked up in terms of head coach? It's been a while since they've really had that constant, like that steady presence there at head coach. You think he's going to be in it here for the long haul?
Yeah, it's been such a coaching carousel. Phil Jackson's worst mistake as a president, he came in mid-season, late in the season of that 2013-14 season, and already had his mind up that he wasn't going to move on with Woodson. I mean, the Knicks closed very strongly that year. I think they may have closed on an 18-6 run and almost made the playoffs, and then Phil didn't even interview Woodson to stay on. I mean, he was just done. And he hired Derek Fisher without any coaching experience, and that was his first mistake. And then his second mistake was Jeff Hornacek. Well, his biggest mistake was the triangle, trying to force the triangle upon a coach. So Phil's biggest problem was he couldn't find the right coach. Same with Steve Mills. He couldn't find the right coach with a big mistake in David Fizdale. And now Leon Rose, the best thing he's done, he hasn't really upgraded the talent that much. In fact, he blew the lottery pick probably, but he hired the right coach.
Well, that's what I want to ask you about. One of the things I want to bring up, Obi Toppin. Why do you think he's struggled this year? Like, what have you seen from him? Do you think maybe it's just inexperience, maybe a little jitters, first-year jitters?
Yeah, there are excuses. There's no doubt. The first-year jitters, you could see it. And one of the reasons is he doesn't get to play through his mistakes. So he's playing power forward. That's all he could really play. Julius Randle's having a monster year, and Thibodeau likes to give his top players maximum minutes. So if Toppin's not producing anything, he's out of the game after a full night of 7 minutes. And so you play tighter, I think, when you know that if you make a mistake on the defensive end, or if you toss up a air ball on a three-point shot, you're coming out of the game soon. Right. Thibodeau does not give him any margin for error. So I think there's some jitters in that respect. But I also think, and I wrote this last week in a column, that maybe we all talked that this draft was going to be difficult for NBA GMs because they didn't have the draft combine, they didn't have a lot of private workouts. They did work out Toppin, but they didn't have the NCAA tournament or the conference tournament. So maybe in the A-10 tournament, maybe in that bigger stage, maybe Toppin is slowed down a little bit, and surely he could have been exposed in the NCAA tournament when the competition got much stronger. He's not playing St. Bonaventure, and he's not playing Fordham anymore. He's playing Kentucky and Duke. So you never know if his stock would have fallen and if there would have been more question marks. But based on what they had going with the knowledge, he was the best player in college basketball on a team that everyone thought was going to win the championship. So they didn't have enough data, and maybe that's why they could have blown that pick. And they could have really blown it because they need a point guard, and Halliburton is the one that is most outperforming what the Knicks expected. The Knicks didn't even have Halliburton high on their board. Like, if Toppin wasn't there, they weren't even taking Halliburton. They were probably taking Vassell.
How about, talk about surprises, though, with that, with the second pick. Or I'm not sure if they traded or they drafted Quickley, but just what a surprise he's been. Just what do you make of his start? He's come out like gangbusters so far for a rookie. Are you impressed with him? Do you think he'll be a part of the future plans here?
Yeah, I think, we're raving about the kid because he was the 25th pick, and also a reach at 25 right. Because all the mock drafts thought he'd be a mid-second round pick. So much excitement.
Surprise of the draft so far.
Exactly, he's in that category. If he was like the 8th pick, you'd say, you'd still be wondering, well, there's some shortcomings defensively, and he's not a playmaker. But the fact that he looks like he could be a career sixth man of the year, it's very, very, it's very, very uplifting for Leon Rose because you take away Quickley and you're just judging Leon's draft on Obi Toppin. He's getting murdered, but he's got Quickley to fall back on, and it wasn't a consensus in that draft room. But Leon and William Wesley and the assistant coach Kenny Payne have strong Kentucky ties, and they knew that this guy was a really good shooter, and they needed shooting. And he could run the point a little bit, not great, and was exposed a little bit when he was starting for a few games, but that's going to change soon. But yeah, it's been a real great story with him, and he's such a good kid, and he's entertaining on the court. Great free throw shooter. He has that move into the lane with the floater. So it's been, and the fans have really been drawn to him.
Right. He's the type of guy I feel like the fans would really get behind because he, like we were saying, 25th pick, not a lottery guy, not too much hype coming around him. So I feel like he's that perfect scrappy guy, the guy the New Yorkers really cling to.
Right. If you go back to preseason, he didn't even play the first preseason game, which shows that he was pretty low in the totem pole. The second preseason game, he may have gotten 7-8 minutes, was only average. Then I think they had an injury like to Dennis Smith or Frank, and then he got more minutes, and then he started to explode once he got some real minutes. So going into training camp, I don't think Thibodeau thought of him any more than Jared Harper. I don't think he thought that he'd make the rotation, put it that way.
Right, and just going back to the team, I was going to say it's probably very important you think that they get one of those top 6 seeds, right? Because they don't want to be in that 7 to 10 that play-in tournament. Do you think that's really emphasized here to get one of those top 6 seeds?
Well, if it's not, it should be. And there's a lot of I don't think fans really understand. I don't think they get it that if the Knicks finish 7th or 8th, they're going to be all, oh, we're in the playoffs.
Yeah,
technically, they're actually not in the playoffs. Technically, the playoff drought would continue if they don't then move on in the play-in tournament to the final 8. Right. So the format is even silly with 9 versus 10, 7 versus 8, and the winner. Yeah, then if the 7th, whoever wins the 7-8 is in, and then the 8 plays the winner of the 9-10. But anyway, the Knicks could finish in 7th and still be in the lottery, which would be sort of the best of both worlds. In some ways, you got a little play-in tournament experience, but you still have a chance of winning the number 1 lottery pick, although they'd be one of the worst percentages. So, it's just a very weird format. Right. And it's too bad because, they legitimately, I feel they're going to be 8 or 7. And I wish that would have been the official breaking of the Knicks playoff drought. But technically, if you go by the NBA semantics, it's not the playoffs.
Right. And I feel like that's a tough spot to be in because, let's be honest, this team probably isn't winning a championship. And like you said, if they don't win in the play-in tournament, they still have a chance in the lottery, get a high pick. But at the same time, I don't think an organization would ever, not want to make the playoffs. And I think, though, maybe they can make some noise in the playoffs. Maybe win a first-round series. Maybe push things to a 6 or 7 game series. Just what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think the organization really wants to be in the final 8, no matter what. They don't want to be in the lottery. I think the feeling is we have enough young players, we have enough draft picks. The draft is a crapshoot. I know it's a very good draft, too, so it is deep. So even if there's 17, listen, they could always trade up, too. They'll have 2 first-round picks, and then the second-round pick of Detroit's could be like 31 or 32. So, they could always move up in the draft. So they really would like to make that next step. They'd like to be known as the team to officially break the next 7-year playoff drought. Revenue-wise, it's not going to be as great as they thought because maybe they'll increase the total to 5,000 for the playoffs or the play-in tournament, but that's not 19,400. So Dolan doesn't get a lot of revenue or as much as he would have thought to make the play-in tournament or the playoffs, but still, an extra couple of games at the Garden. It's a tough season for these owners. Any more revenue they could produce would be great.
Going back to my prior question, if they do get in, you think they could maybe win a round, maybe get to a second round, push that 6-7 games? Just what would be your expectations if they did get in the playoffs?
They play defense so well and so enthusiastically and aggressively that I think they would have a puncher's chance. They say in the playoffs, defense wins, defense and rebounding. As much as it's a 3-point shooting league, I think defense really becomes a bigger factor in the playoffs when you're playing the team every single night or every other night. So because they have that foundation, I think they would have a chance of giving someone a good series like the Sixers.
Yeah,
it would be
amazing. Games. Embiid hasn't been
right.
They've
True, they don't have that.
Games.
Right, but Embiid was out. But even with Embiid, I think maybe they can hang with them. Listen, Philadelphia has a 15-game winning streak against the Knicks, so I don't think the Knicks could win the series, but I think they can maybe scare them a little bit, squeak out a game or two. But yeah, listen, if they make it in the top 8, then they play 1 or 2, and the Nets have their number a little bit also. At full strength, the Nets have the most talent in the NBA, so it's going to be tough. But if they could get 6 and then they avoid, the Nets or the Sixers, then who knows what could happen.
Right. They'd have Milwaukee. I think that would be a tough series probably. I mean, obviously we saw what Milwaukee did to them last week. I think it'd probably really benefit them to get into that 4-5 spot. That way you're playing like someone like the Heat or someone like that. I think you can get the Heat.
No doubt about it. You're right. I forgot about Milwaukee. That's a bad matchup for them. For some reason, Giannis takes a special interest in burying the Knicks, and I believe it dates back to the fact that the Knicks drafted Thanasis, his brother, and then almost didn't play him, kept him in the G League. He may have played 2 games with the Knicks. So, yeah, you're right. 6 doesn't help them either get out of the first round. And I think actually the Bucks may be a worse matchup for them than the Sixers.
Right. How about Julius Randle? Did you ever think he'd be this good and have this much impact on the team?
Really shocked that he made this jump. You know, you heard in the off season that, he's doing great work in Dallas, really getting in great shape. You know, he's really, dedicated. But you hear that so much and it never works out. Like, how many stories I did on Dennis Smith Jr. about, he's really working on his jump shot and, he's going to be a different player, blah, blah, blah. All across the years, sometimes you take it with a grain of salt. And then this time it really, really worked. I mean, it really, really was true. This guy was so devastated by his first year in New York. He took it so personally. He came in as their big free agent signing, and it was such a dud of a season for him. I mean, his numbers weren't bad, but just the fact that the Knicks were just started off the season, 2-18 or 4-18, and, he was part of the problem. He wasn't a good enough leader. He's admitted it all. He wasn't a good enough leader. He wasn't, a smart enough basketball player to make his teammates better. All the things that he said he would be, he was not. And now he's, this season has been just a dream. And that's why, I wish he'd be a little less vocal about the officiating. I wish he would be.
Column on that.
Yeah, it wasn't the most popular column to some Knicks fans, but I've written so many wonderful pieces about Julius. My point was, as much as an Iron Man he's been, and he's been the rock of this team, he needs to show a little more leadership and not blame the referees for losing that game. He did shoot 7 of 22. That might be a factor in losing the game also.
You see him as part of the Knicks' long-term plans? He's still young. I think he's 26, 27. Do you think they're kind of considering him to be part of this rebuild long-term?
Without a doubt. I mean, they were so desperate to have that one star, and they thought they would have to trade for him, and they thought they'd maybe have to trade Randle in a package to get that star. But now that star is Randle.
Right.
And, he's 26, so it's not like, he's at the end of his prime or anything. He's at the start of his prime. So why can't he keep this up as long as he stays hungry? And he just seems so motivated right now. I just hope that he continues to be this motivated. He hasn't missed a game all year, which is just tremendous in this day and age of NBA basketball where every Nets player, the load management. I mean, Kevin Durant hasn't played forever after not playing forever. And, Kyrie takes games off all the time and is probably missing this road trip for personal reasons. Right. So, and then you have Julius Randle, who hasn't missed a darn game. And all those analytic gurus, and I tweet about this and I've written about it, like there's no real statistic for just playing games.
No, there
for just being there for your team every single night.
Oh, yeah.
And the analytics goes with these percentages and averages, but they don't factor in the most important thing, and that's being there for your team every single game. And that's Julius Randle.
I agree wholeheartedly, and I just hate analytics. I mean, sidebar, I just hate the impact they've really had in baseball, too. I feel like they've had mostly an impact in baseball, but yeah, same thing in all these sports. You can't measure someone's heart. You can't measure someone's leadership.
Yeah.
So I'm totally on board with you.
Right. You can measure games played, though, but none of these statistics, when they shoot it back at me, ever talk about that. In fact, R.J. Barrett last season, he didn't get on the rookie teams, and John Hollinger came out with all these efficiency stats and everything, but he played, listen, he had an ankle injury late, and he missed like 8 straight games, but he was there. Zion Williamson got votes. He got first place, second place, and third place votes for Rookie of the Year. He played 20 games. Yeah, how do you even think of voting this man Rookie of the Year? Don't get me started there. You know how I feel. R.J. Barrett was there almost every night for the Knicks last season.
And that brings me to my last question. I know you're strapped for a little bit of time here, but yeah, just what do you make of R.J. Barrett in year 2? Just the maturation of him. Just what's your analysis on him in his second year?
He's just listen. He doesn't have the athleticism of Zion or Ja Morant, but he's very crafty and he gets to the basket because he's got a lot of moves and he's very strong and. And he did that last season. He's finishing a little better, but the bigger thing beyond that is that he's improved his three-point shooting to a respectable level, and he's improved his free throw shooting a lot. And that was a huge downer for the Knicks last season because RJ can draw fouls because he's always going to the rack, and he's not afraid to, create contact. So the fact that he was such a poor free throw shooter, again, hurt his efficiency. So the fact that he could hit the free throw and now he's respectable, teams have to respect the three-point shot, is just going to continue to elevate him. And he's their second option to Julius, and it's not bad at age 20. Listen, Obi Toppin is 23 years old. Right. That's the scary part of Obi. Barrett is still 20. And still has a lot of room to grow. Does Obi at 23? Yeah, sure. I mean, he'll get better, and he's nervous right now. But the fact that Barrett is still so young is just a great sign for the Knicks. There's no doubt. You cannot say that R.J. Barrett will not be an All-Star one day. Last season, you were like, oh, boy, maybe there was someone else in the draft. Maybe they could have moved down. But there's no one, even John Hollinger, when he re-ranked the draft, put R.J. Barrett as a solid 3.
Oh, yeah, he's made a huge jump here in year 2, and hopefully more good things to come from him. But, yeah, Mark, again, just wanted to thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure it's been a fun season so far to cover the Knicks, and hopefully more good things to come. But, again, just wanted to thank you for popping on, and hope you have a great day.
All right, Chris, thanks so much. I really enjoyed it, and good luck with you.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Some fun Knicks talk there with Marc Berman of the New York Post. But that'll do it for another episode of Basic Thoughtonomics, episode 24 in the books. I'm your host, Chris Grosso. Feel free to follow the podcast on social channels on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Basic Thought Pod. I changed it up. On Instagram, the account name was at Basic Thoughts Pod. So it was a S on the end of thought, so it was plural, but I made it uniform, so now it's just Basic Thought Pod across all the platforms. Feel free to follow me. Follow my personal accounts as well at ChrisGrosso16 on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, feel free to leave feedback, whether it's on my podcast page, personal page, on the apps. Feel free to leave any and all feedback. Feel free to subscribe. Really appreciate the feedback. And thanks, everyone, and hope you have a good week.